I really love being alive, and I really love being in partnership with my wife, and I really love the process of self-inquiry and dedicating myself to the love of truth. And these are things that keep me awakening more and more as I progress through this life.
Hi, and welcome to Voices of Esalen. I'm Sam Stern. Today, my guest is longtime Esalen teacher and leader, Perry Holloman. Perry is an internationally renowned massage instructor. He and his wife, Johanna, enjoy legions of faithful followers with their brand of Deep Bodywork. Perry is also a dedicated and trusted Gestalt practitioner, and together we explored a bit of the history of the last 40 years of the Esalen Institute, from dishwashing to dancing, from massage to Gestalt, and far beyond. Here's my conversation with one of the more articulate people running around the good state of California, Perry Holloman. Perry Holloman, thank you so much for joining us today on Voices of Esalen.
My pleasure.
And I wanted to start off this talk with you by asking you about your earliest impressions of Esalen, when you came and what the place was like when you arrived.
I got here in March of 1979, and I had been going to school on the East Coast and preparing myself for a life, a professional life, most likely as a lawyer. Most of my friends, most of my peer group in college were interested in going into that vocation because if one didn't know what one wanted to be when one grew up at the school I was going to, one became a lawyer. One went into the law. And so that's what I thought that I was going to do. But something in, I guess you could call it my soul, was screaming, this is not my path in this life. This is not what I'm meant to do. And so I talked with my parents, who were very generously paying for my education, and let them know that I felt like I was wasting their money at that point in time and would like to take some time off to sort of figure out what my direction in life was going to be. They said, well, how would you like to start out with a 5-day with David Schiffman at the Esalen Institute?
Wow.
And I said, that sounds good to me. I had a job lined up in Europe after that. And I came to Esalen, and I can honestly say in the language of those days, my mind was so blown by what I experienced here. David introduced me to the world of Gestalt in that 5-day. And Gestalt is one of the oldest healing arts and awareness practices that has been taught at Esalen almost since Esalen became a thing in 1962-63. Of course, the legacy of Fritz Perls continues to live on here in many different forms through many different teachers. But what I was introduced to at the time, although I don't think I could have articulated it in this way, was that Gestalt is a very powerful tool for supporting the learning, growth, and development of human individuals, groups, and organizations. The basic premise, Gestalt, like Esalen Massage, if you watch 10 different Gestaltists work, it will seem like they're doing 10 very different things. However, what one will notice looking more deeply that all of the approaches have in common is the focus upon the development of awareness. So no matter how, Dick Price, for example, was the purest. He called himself a reflector. He liked to describe himself as something like an Indian tracker who would follow without disturbing, follow in the footprints of the person that he was facilitating, to the point where their awareness combined with his support would have an illuminating effect on their ability to gather information about their experience moment to moment to moment, and that in and of itself leads to learning, growth and development. So the idea in Gestalt is the more aware we are, the greater the potential that we will learn and grow and develop through our experience. And awareness is the factor which illuminates experience in such a way that we can see things, we can experience things from different perspectives.
So were you immediately drawn to this practice of Gestalt? As I'm guessing you're around 21, 22 when
I was 20 years old, yeah. I was attracted to all of the awareness practices, both the somatically based practices, the bodywork, Esalen Massage. There was a brilliant teacher here named Al Drucker who I remember I had been here about 3 or 4 weeks, and after my 5-day with David Schiffman, I started asking some people who I'd made friends with, is there any way that I can stay around here?
Yeah.
And because there's something here that I deeply resonate with, and I recognize that my life path would probably move in the directions that Esalen offered if I could find a way to be a part of the place. So like many before me, I was given a job as a dishwasher, a duck, in the kitchen. And about 3 weeks in, a man named Al Drucker, who is this teacher that I was referring to before, came in and he said, I'm starting a group, training group in deep tissue work for people. At the time, they called us Work Scholar 2s. Work Scholar 2s were the precursors to extended students. And I think I was the 8th Work Scholar 2 ever hired by the place. So it was a relatively new thing at the time. So I was in this class with people like Dean Juhan, who has become an incredible author and teacher of many different somatic disciplines. A number of other people who are no longer here at the place, although Shar Pius was part of the group that I was in. She's one of the senior practitioners and teachers of Esalen Massage. Over the course of the year, myself and a number of other students, I think we numbered 12, something like that, were brought into this world of somatic education by Al Drucker, and he was also a devotee of Sai Baba, and just a brilliant man. He came to Esalen himself in a healing crisis. He had been working for the Pentagon, designing weapons and bombs for the Pentagon. He was a very high-level, very talented engineer. And he developed liver cancer in the course of his work for the Pentagon. And he came to Esalen, I think in 1968, looking to heal himself. And he healed himself in the Roundhouse, what's now called the Meditation House, down in Hot Springs Creek, right at the bridge. So any of you that who are listening to this transmission, if you have an opportunity to go and sit in the Roundhouse and the Meditation House at Esalen, it has quite a history to it. The brief story I'll tell about Al, beyond what I've just told, is that he had an insight that if he took any pain medication to deal with his cancer, he chose the Gerson therapy to heal himself. And that if he took any pain medication, it was going to interfere with the process of healing. So he described a process of about 2 weeks where he was going through what we can think of, what we can call a healing crisis, where he said it felt like someone had his liver in a vice and was slowly turning it each minute tighter and tighter. And then he said he had an experience about 2 weeks in of dealing with that. If you can believe it, this man had a will that is stronger than anyone I've ever met in my lifetime. He said he had the experience. Suddenly he realized he was on the ceiling of the Roundhouse looking down at his body writhing in pain, and he knew that it was over. At a certain point, he dropped back into his body, and the pain went away, and the cancer went away. And that was in 1969, something like that. And Al Drucker passed away, I think, 3 years ago of old age, not of liver cancer. But in any case, he was a brilliant teacher and used the somatic discipline of deep tissue work to basically give spiritual teachings about non-dual reality as he was taught by Sai Baba. So these were the types of things when I first got here that were available. The first 2 work scholar months that I did, you know, they were allowing me as a work scholar to do the work study programs because they'd hired me so quickly. I hadn't had any time to really participate in the educational aspect of the place. Dick Price did the first one, and it was basically, you can describe it as a marathon open seat month. And then the next month, there was a teacher who I don't remember his name, but he didn't show up. He just didn't show up. And so Dick Price did another month, and it was clear that he was not prepared to do that second month. So he brought in Gregory Bateson for 3 or 4 nights, and he brought in Stan Groff. And at the time, I had no idea who these people were, right? And my mother, who was a college professor and anthropologist, when she came and visited and saw Gregory Bateson sitting out on the deck, she said, you know who that is? And I said, yeah, that's Gregory Bateson. He and I play chess sometimes, and he's kind of the old grandpa of the place. And she said, no, do you know who that is? And then she proceeded to let me know that he's one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. And his work in cybernetics has been very influential in many different disciplines, from sociology, anthropology, into psychology, into systems theoretical and family systems psychology, those branches of psychology. And, and the same thing with Stan Groff. I had no idea who he was. And yet I had the benefit with 14 other people of having this man for a full weekend, just beginning to do his holotropic breath work. It wasn't even called holotropic breath work at that point in time. We just laid down on mats and he played this music and we started breathing and talked about our experiences afterwards. And, I just thought, this is interesting stuff. And in retrospect, I realize how lucky I was to be exposed to these master teachers in the way that I was, because I think had I known who they were, there may have been more filters I would have put up, or there would have been more sort of relational awkwardness of a certain kind. I'm not sure I would have felt comfortable sitting down and playing chess with Gregory Bateson had I known who he was. And yet that was, there was a very personal, accessible nature to the place and to the master teachers that were living here in residence. And Dick Price, Stan Groff, Al Drucker, Gregory Bateson were 4 of them.
Did it feel like Esalen was a relatively small or contained community at the time?
No, it felt like the Esalen community was tribal in nature at the time. So nobody worked more than 4 days a week, and a lot of people tried to get away with 3.5. And so what that led to was a great deal of unstructured time that people had for their own self-exploration, for hanging out together. And there was a great deal of music that happened back in the day. On warm, sunny summer days like today, it was very rare not to hear really good drumming happening. And again, at the time, I didn't know it. I didn't know who these people were, but there were world-class musicians and drummers living in Big Sur. Charles Lloyd, for example, the great jazz musician, had a place up on Partington Ridge, and he would often come down and play the saxophone. And there was a pianist named Michael Petrucciani who is just an incredible, if you saw him, you would never guess that he was a world-class musician, because he was born with a birth defect where his legs were paralyzed, and he was a very small man, but he had these enormously long arms and fingers. And when he got to the piano, Charles Lloyd credited Michael Petrucciani with bringing him back into a love of his music. These were people that would frequent Esalen and just play and be, and there was a tribal quality to it, and the Big Sur native dancers evolved during that time. They ended up befriending and being supported by Barclay Henry, who was a well-known, he's passed, but well-known Big Sur luminary, and would often support the arts in certain ways. There was a kind of a pulsing, visceral quality to the place that still does live on. I have a feeling it's waiting to reemerge in some way, shape, or form, because I can still feel the pulse of it present here. At that point in time, that pulse was in very full bloom, and I would say I caught in 1979, 1980, 1981, the tail end of that phase of Esalen's manifestation. And
could you sense in the ensuing years sort of like a mutedness coming through, or how did the Esalen Institute evolve in the 1980s?
Something that's important to understand in Esalen's evolution is that it has gone through a number of financial crises that have required it to adapt. This property, there's a tremendous amount of overhead that is involved with supporting this property. And, Esalen kind of exploded in the 60s and 70s, but was forced to mature in the 80s and 90s and into the 21st century. And a great deal of that maturation was forced upon the place because of, a place like Esalen really needs to be endowed, because it's a place that is dedicated to the arts. You can think of it as the healing arts, My experience of it has been that it is primarily a place where people come to learn to become teachers, and to heal themselves. And it's still something that through the work-study program, through what's offered here in the somatic arts, and what I'm sort of the last of the Gestalt Mohicans here at this point in time, although Michael Clemens does come a couple of times a year and bring his considerable talents to the place. But we still do offer a place to people where they can learn, where they can go through difficult life transitions. They can choose to move in different directions, either in their personal lives or career-wise, and they can come and heal themselves. Deeply traumatized individuals come to Esalen constantly seeking self-healing. And I'm in contact with a lot of them, so I bear a very personal witness quite often to that process, both in the seminars that I give here and in the private practice that I maintain here at this point in time in both Gestalt and bodywork.
How long did you stay a dishwasher?
Well, I think I'm one of the few people in the history of the place that did back-to-back work-study twos or extended studentships. So I was a duck in the pond for 2 years.
Wow.
And then...
Listening to music the whole time, or what?
Oh, boy. I'm not sure we should go there in this, in this podcast.
Enough said.
Because those were wild times, and I was a very young man at that point, and... as a young man, my blood was a lot hotter than it is now. So, but what happened after my my baptism in the duck pond was Janet Letterman hired me to be a teacher at Gazebo, which is what I did for the next 3 years from 1981 to 1984. And that was an extremely rich experience. I think Janet Letterman remains an underappreciated contributor to the importance of Gestalt awareness practice. Janet told me this story about her first meeting with Fritz, that she watched Fritz work, and she immediately recognized that what Fritz was doing with adults, she was doing with children. And that the principle of organismic self-regulation, meaning there is an innate knowledge and wisdom in living organisms, in humans in particular, because of the size of our brains and the amount of complex information we can take in and process and learn and grow and develop from, that there is a great deal of potential in children that if we give them an environment through which they can make real contact with each other relationally as well as with the environment, that there is a potential acceleration of the development and realization and actualization of their potential that can happen if we create an environment that's both challenging yet safe, right? So we want an environment where, they can climb trees and sometimes they'll fall down out of the trees, and that's not so great. But, inside of us, there's an innate wisdom that knows how to live, how to be in contact, how to process, and simply how to be. And that, she said, I have no patience with adults. I'm not interested in that. I'll let Fritz do that part. I want to work with the kids.
Yeah.
And so she set up an environment based upon the principles of Gestalt awareness practice that live on in the teachers that have gone out into the world. And we're just a couple of weeks ago, recently here again, set up the Gazebo for a couple of weeks. I was so happy to see that. There's one teacher in particular named Sophia Snavely, I think is her last name, who is really keeping the fire of the Gazebo burning, and hopefully we'll see it reemerge as a thing, not just here in Esalen, but in the field of early childhood education.
What was it like for you as you're a young guy in your early 20s to spend all day with kids? What did it bring out in you?
Well, I discovered that I had a very natural ability to do it. It was challenging in a much different way than dishwashing. Dishwashing was physically very challenging. Being with kids in that way required me to learn and grow and develop as an individual, because the impact of my behavior was, the stakes were so much higher. If I break a dish, that's one thing, but if I do something that acts as a source of confusion in some way for a kid, that's a lot more complex to unwind. So we would have weekly meetings with Janet, and we would talk about the challenges of having such an open environment and keeping it safely structured. She was just an incredible source of information and wisdom about the nature of young developing human organisms. I will treasure those 3 years that I was able to spend in the gazebo school and directly with Janet Letterman for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. She is an underappreciated master teacher in the history of this place, in my opinion.
What happened after those 3 years? What direction did you feel like, yes, this is my place, I want to continue to live at Esalen?
What was happening was, I have to kind of go back to the beginning. So I did the 5 days with David Schiffman, and then I did the work study months with Dick Price and Stan Groff and Gregory Bateson, and then I noticed that there was something on the community schedule called Gestalt Practicum. So I started going to that, and there was a teacher here named Janet Zuckerman, who was a student both of Fritz's as well as Dick Price's, who Dick basically he tasked her to run what was in-house programming at the time. And she, along with a woman named Betty Dingman ran the work study program, and Janet Zuckerman ran what was called the Experiencing Esalen program, as well as the in-house training of facilitators, which she did through the community schedule. And so once a week we would meet for a Gestalt Practicum, and she was quite often there, and when she was not there, Dick would see to it that a Gestalt teacher usually from the Bay Area or from Los Angeles, or who was a visiting teacher doing a seminar, would come in and basically teach and then supervise us working with each other. And so that was my introduction to training in Gestalt. And so fairly early on, Janet Zuckerman identified me and some other people as potentially talented for this work, and started having me come in and assist in her Experiencing Esalen groups. And then toward the end of my gazebo teachership, I had been assisting with her for about 2 years. And she came up to me before the beginning of a weekend workshop. I still think she kind of had this planned, but I don't know, because she would never give me a direct answer. But we're getting ready to go into what is now Rolf. At the time, the meeting room was called Firo. And said, I have a really bad headache and I can't do this group. You're going to do this group along with my partner at the time. Her name was Maria Lucia Sauer. And so we kind of looked at each other and went, okay. And that was the beginning of my career as a group leader. That was in 1984. Mm-hmm. And so we did that group. We kind of found our way through it, and we found that we really had an aptitude for it, and began to lead Experiencing Esalen groups and work study months all the way up till 1989. Mm-hmm. And so I transitioned out of my work at the gazebo briefly into, I was for about 12 or 14 months a cook in the kitchen, because I still wasn't sure this group leading thing was going to support me. And I thought I still needed an Esalen job. But after about 14 months, I realized, no, I'm a group leader. I'm a teacher. I'm a healing artist. That's what I do. I have to focus on this I have to dedicate my life to it in order to become really, really good and competent at it.
Now you say healing artist. So had you begun your bodywork journey by that time?
Yes, I was working part-time both on the massage crew as well as in what were the 23 rooms doing deep tissue work. And when I could fit sessions in between my gazebo time and then afterwards my cooking shifts, I would do that. But there really wasn't enough time, as a part-time healer and teacher. That at a certain point, one needs to decide. And so I decided fully in 1986 that I was going to quit my staff jobs at Esalen and just be a teacher and a healing artist here at Esalen. And that coincided with a very fortunate opportunity to buy a piece of property close by here, which I now live on with my wife, and built a home up there. It was a trailer at the time, but that gave me a place to live, which, housing has always been an issue here at Esalen, trying to figure out how to be in Big Sur, and that gave me an affordable opportunity just to be in Big Sur, be a Big Sur resident, and focus on the healing arts.
Yeah, so tell me about I'm really curious about your bodywork journey. What started you in that, and what was the climate of bodywork at Esalen when you began?
The massage crew was, I would say, a force of nature at the time when I first got here. It was, one would go down to the baths, and at that point in time, I think for about a year, 79 and 80, all of the practitioners were working naked. There was still kind of a remnant of the perspective that John Hyder came and led a staff week one time and described exactly what it is that I'm trying to describe at the moment. He said, in the 60s and into the 70s, we started from the premise that everything that we had learned in this life was a lie. And that through doing inquiry-based work, and in some cases, confrontive Gestalt type of work combined with Rolfing and combined with other forms of exploration, we could break through the structures of habit that kept our perception in a very narrow band, and we could break out of that and begin again to evolve as a species and realize our true potential. And so when one went down to the baths and was in the field of the massage practitioners at that point in time, that perspective was very palpable, really palpable. There was a sense of, I'm kind of entering this really juicy, somatically based twilight zone here. Right?
Yeah.
And then, the massages, of course, at that point in time, it was very difficult to find that quality and that type of awareness-based, presence-based type of bodywork anywhere else in the world. You had to come here to experience it. Now, that's no longer the case because so many teachers have gone out in the world and have educated people from China to Indonesia to the heart of Europe, etc. So, one can find this now globally, but this was the place that birthed the massage industry in the world. Wow. And those were the people, the Peggy Horans and the Deborah Meadows and the Brita Ostroms and the George Kings, a lot of people that, are no longer with us. They were all working down there. And the interesting thing was that they would also invite visiting teachers who were just brilliant teachers in their own right and brilliant somatic artists in their own right. And they would come and they would work with people on the massage crew. They would do classes just for us. And you would immediately see this information gaining access to the forum. So Esalen Massage was like, you could think of it as like an open source form that was presence-based and long stroking-based, but the enthusiasm for experimentation has always been really, really high in that forum. It's what continues to make it what I consider an evolutionarily based form within the industry, because we still got those kinds of teachers coming in and adding information to what it is that we do. And then you'll see people, doing cranial work at the end of their sessions, holding people's heads, and because they've, gone on to mastery in that discipline and begin to create sort of a hybrid form between the two. And it's something that is still, the pulse of that is still happening. And the tribal nature of it back in 79, 80, 81 was literally palpable within the ethers of the baths complex.
What aspect of the work did you find yourself drawn to? I mean, you're known for deep body work. Obviously, now you and your wife Johanna teach a very popular deep body work series. And I'm curious, was that what you were immediately drawn to, or were there other things that got your attention?
I was immediately drawn to everything that I was exposed to when I got here, from Gestalt to Esalen Massage to deep tissue work, which is what Al Drucker called his work, to acupuncture, homeopathy, 5 rhythms dance. When I first got here, I started dancing in 79, 80, and 81 with Gabrielle Roth before she was Gabrielle Roth. And there were like 20, 25 people in her classes. 5 rhythms was a warm-up exercise that we did on our way to doing what she called ritual theater at that point in time. So I was attracted to everything. What I spent my time focusing on, because I had to choose just as a matter of time, was deep tissue work, Gestalt, and Esalen Massage. Those were the 3 disciplines that I focused on myself.
So you're making a distinction between the deep tissue work and Esalen Massage. So when you were doing an Esalen Massage at that time, you kind of abstained from the deep tissue.
Yeah, and there was a much clearer boundary between the two. And it was really interesting because at that point in time, the deep tissue people, they'd kind of look at the Esalen Massage people and go, all they're doing is spreading oil. And the Esalen Massage people would go, boy, those deep tissue people are dangerous. And so there was all of this stuff going on, not just here within the community, but you'd see it between the different teachers that would come. It's like then Moshe Feldenkrais's people would come through, and no one could really figure out what it was they were doing. But one gentleman who was a teacher for the Feldenkrais Guild, announced in a Wednesday night presentation that this is the most important, most effective form of somatic therapy the world has ever seen and likely ever will see. So there was a lot of narcissism built into everyone's sort of investment in whatever approach they were embodying. But what I began to notice, I noticed the Traeger people and the acupuncturists and the Esalen Massage people and the deep tissue people. I began to notice that all of these approaches were effective, but not all practitioners of all of the approaches were effective. So I began to look more deeply at what is it that the practitioners who are effective are doing that is common to these different forms. And I came up with a couple of things that I noticed. One was that all of these different forms are effective only when they're presence-based. So the practitioners who could drop into a presence-based state when they were working were much more likely to evoke that kind of a state in the people that they were working on. And a lot of modern research has demonstrated that when we drop into meditative states where the actual functioning of the brain begins to change, physical healing, physical processes of healing, self-organizing and healing can happen much more quickly and much more easily when someone is in that type of a state. And if the practitioner is in that kind of a state, there's a transmission kind of an experience that will often happen with the person that's being touched. So, I would see some practitioners who I would watch constantly looking at the clock, and obviously, I'm getting bored and I'm ready for lunch, I'm ready for a break. And there wasn't a presence-based quality to what they were doing quite often. So that was one thing that I noticed. The other thing that I noticed, which was even more revealing to me, was the people that were getting really good results really liked what they were doing. So it's like if you like playing a certain kind of a musical instrument, or you like sculpting, or you like painting, you will follow that art to its annihilating edge, to where you achieve a level of mastery of it. But what's necessary is a love of that art. Right? Yeah. So I noticed the people that were getting good results, like watching Milton Traeger demonstrate. It was just so obvious that he was in love with this art of touch. And he could do things with what he was doing that other people who were trying to do it from their heads, they just couldn't achieve the same results. But some people could, because there was a sense of, wow, this is really my thing. I really like doing this. And there's something about that attitude that, even beyond presence, brings a kind of an expansive joy and sense of connectedness to the art, which leads to a kind of mastery. So I began to see through these sort of internecine quarrels that different, the Rolfers thought they were the best thing since sliced bread, and so did the Feldenkrais practitioners, so did the Esalen Massage practitioners. And there were always these ongoing debates about which was better, which was a completely false debate.
Was there a large contingent of Rolfers, the Rolfing having been born or at least popularized at Esalen?
There was, Ida Rolf came to Esalen, and Dick Price told me that when Ida first got here, she had been developing Rolfing for 25, 30 years by the time she came to Esalen. But she'd only taught a couple of people how to Rolf. And Fritz Perls was suffering from tremendous chronic back pain when she got here. And she said to Fritz, I think I can help you with that. And so she Rolfed him into or out of his back pain. And of course, after she did that, everybody wanted to become a Rolfer. Everybody wanted to learn Rolfing. And so she created the 10 sessions of Rolfing as a way of teaching people how to do what it is that she's doing. There wasn't, there was a general approach that you can see the 10 sessions in. That's how they emerged out of what she was doing. You got to free the breath first in order to work deeply on someone. Then you move down and do some work on the hips, and then you need to open up the feet, and right? So you can see the 10 sessions kind of built into, but she created them as a way of teaching people how to do that work. Yeah. And so there were a number of people here, but, she taught a lot of the most brilliant teachers of Rolfing, and brilliant people tend to not want to stay within the structure of a school. And so people like Al Drucker, people like Joe Heller, to name two, went on to create their own approaches to this same art. And I had the benefit of studying with Al. And what my wife and I have done, we started doing this when we were still living in Germany, but we developed it fully when we got here, is, we realized that this whole thing about which approach is better is complete nonsense. And what we did was we created a form where we have combined the deeply therapeutic nature of deep tissue work with the aesthetic integrating nature of Esalen Massage into a form called Deep Bodywork. So we've taken the information from deep tissue work and we've broken it down in a different way such that people can learn slowly aspects of that work and include it immediately into their massage practice, and make it available on a much wider basis to people in their massage practices, because not everybody's has the time or money to go do a Rolfing training and then figure out how to translate that work into what it is that they're already doing.
You seem to have a devoted group of students who I always see. You teach about 3 or 4 modules a year here?
4 modules a year, yeah.
I see the same people coming.
Right.
They're really... Yeah, it's like a band of practitioners.
It's a tribe, really. Yeah. And I keep using that word because there's something about the connectedness that a community of people begins to feel when they're involved in a common task together over time. And the Deep Bodywork program is a program now with its own levels of certification, from practitioner to advanced practitioner to teacher. And the reason you're seeing people coming over and over and over again is they're working their way through those different levels.
So coming back to where you were at during this time, I guess we're in the mid to late 80s, was there a point at which you noticed sort of like a change in yourself as you took on more responsibility, as you absorbed the teachings of the place? What was happening for you during that time?
Well, I was teaching more and more, and, after Dick's death in 1985, the emphasis on Gestalt training here changed completely, because Dick had a gravitas, of course, that if he wanted a Gestalt program going here, there was going to be a Gestalt program going here. And after he died, there was kind of a natural questioning period of what are we doing? What are we doing at, the level of in-house training? And some different perspectives started to come into the place in terms of how that affected Gestalt training here at Esalen. We no longer had, for instance, weekly community groups or something called the Leaders Group that was going on for a couple of years here. And there were attempts to keep this kind of in-house training going, but they didn't have the same kind of institutional support that they had pre-1985. I was teaching more and more and more up until about 1989. Then I had my own sort of personal insight that actually I needed to go out into the world at that point. Mm-hmm. And in order to, I just knew sort of intuitively that my next level of development, it was like I was still living at my parents' house or something, being here at Esalen, And so I fell in love with a woman who's a German, who's my current wife, Johanna, and followed her to Germany. And I lived and worked in Germany from 1990 to 1996. I pretty immediately got hired by one of the Gestalt Institutes over in Germany. So we started a massage school over there, as well as I was working through the Gestalt Institute of Dortmund. And it was a very rich time in my development because I collaborated with a man who's now deceased, who was not only a Gestaltist, trained by one of Fritz Perl's students who had lived at Esalen way back in the 60s. But so we had this common Esalen connection between the two of us, but he was a teacher for the Psychodrama Institute. And what I learned about the history of Gestalt was that Fritz Perls had taken quite a bit of the role-playing kind of work that was pioneered by Jacob Moreno, who was the creator of psychodrama, and incorporated it into Gestalt and actually presented a lot of it as original. But really, it was inspired by the work of the open chair, or what we call open seat here at Esalen, that was pioneered by Jacob Moreno. Mm-hmm. The open chair was a technique that he used to, if one was doing a piece of psychodrama and there was another character implicit in the room, he would say, well, let's bring your colleague in here out of your imagination and actually into the room, and let's put him or her into the open chair. Yes. And see let's dialogue with them.
So who'd bring in somebody from the group to play a role?
Well, sometimes there would be a person in the group that would actually then do that, but other times there would just be an empty chair. Mm-hmm. And the protagonist of the work, whoever was doing the work themselves, would go back and forth and actually be themselves, and then be the other person, and then be themselves again. And when Fritz witnessed that, he recognized the potency of that technique, that it really brought people into experiential contact with things, to embody things in that way, and brought it out of the realm of the mind, right, into physical reality. Mm. And that became a big part of how Fritz did Gestalt work. And so when I was over in Germany and witnessing how this man was doing role play kind of work, I immediately, just lights went off for me in terms of my understanding about what I had been learning in a much less structured way here at Esalen. So I collaborated with him for 5 or 6 years, and then my wife and I moved back to Esalen in 1996, and we started our second phase of our living and teaching here at Esalen at that point in time.
Was it a challenge at all to be doing this work in German?
Yes and no. In the beginning it was, but it took me about 6 months to really become fluent in German. And one of the things that I noticed was there were just certain things that I could communicate in German that weren't possible in English, and vice versa. So I I really liked and still continue to like speaking and teaching in German. And people will often tell me, they say, Perry, you're different when you speak German.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one I like better, right? Both of you have different qualities, the English-speaking Perry and the German-speaking Perry. And it's interesting because my internal experience shifts a little bit when I move from one language to the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you came back for phase 2, what was your role within the Esalen community?
Fairly quickly, of course, I began working back here as both a body worker and a facilitator fairly quickly. And I noticed in some way, shape, or form, because I had been here during the days when Gregory Bateson and Gabrielle Roth, before she was Gabrielle Roth, and Dick Price and Stan Groff were much more a part of the place. I had kind of this sort of senior person kind of status, like I was holding some form of the legacy of the place. And I noticed people would relate to me very much in that way. And there was a great deal of curiosity about my experiences when I first got here, and my experiences of people like who I mentioned, what it was like to be in their presence and what I learned from them. So I was integrated into both a facilitator as well as a healing arts teacher role quite quickly, that I would say gathered real momentum in 2000, 2001. And I was doing because I'd lived in Europe and I'd started a number of different basically schools, I would say, where I was teaching different disciplines in different places. So I was spending, I would say, about a quarter of the year traveling at that point internationally, and about 3/4 of the year here at Esalen teaching and in private practice.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the journey of being a father. I've met your daughter Maya, and I know your son Nico quite well, and I'm curious how you think the experience of being intertwined in this community for so many years shaped the way that you became a father.
I was very fortunate to have the gazebo for both of those children. And particularly for my first child, Maya, I was 23 years old when she was born. And I was like, whoa, I have no idea what I'm doing. And Janet Letterman was there, and a woman named Leah Thompson, and a bunch of other gazebo teachers. And I had been working at the gazebo for a couple of years at that point. So I knew about being with kids, but I didn't know about being a father. Two interrelated but distinct things. So I was, like any young parent, deeply affected by the sense of responsibility that just is an inherent emergent property of becoming a parent. With my second kid, I was much more prepared for that experience than with the first one. The value of having learned how to allow a child to be, and as a parent to be in presence with a child, no matter what they're going through, whether they're just sitting and drawing and being creative and sort of minding their own business and not wanting to be bothered, to, moving through something developmental that is difficult and requires both an understanding of how to be there and not to be there in such a way that interferes with their learning, growth, and development, is one of the enduring gifts that Janet Letterman gave me and others with whom she came in contact.
I would love to to talk about at least two more things. What is the state of Gestalt here now? And I was wondering if you could describe this training program, I believe it was, that you wanted to speak about.
Gestalt at Esalen, there's a long legacy of Gestalt. At first, it was defined by Fritz Perls, and then after Fritz by some of his primary trainees like Claudio Naranjo, John Hyder, and then, of course, Dick Price. And there was a long period of time where there were two streams of Gestalt that were happening at Esalen. One that was representative of the initiator-reflector, very purely awareness-based Gestalt that is the basis of Gestalt awareness practice and the kind of work that Chris Price continues to teach. And then there was also a stream that one could describe as encounter-based and was based in the work of Will Schutz and his work with groups and organizations that one can think of as more confrontive in nature. Awareness and presence were also primary aspects of the way he approached his work, but there was also a great deal of emphasis placed on working with defense, with ego defense, and the necessity of getting defense through the practice of awareness to shift and change such that that which was authentic in man could come through, right? And so the one approach was, I would call, more of a yin style approach, and the other approach is more of a yang, a lot more active intervention, confrontation. The woman that taught me was taught in both streams, Janet Zuckerman, but she had a certain love for the more yang approach. So these two types of streams have been present in the stream of Gestalt in its history at Esalen since Gestalt first arrived here. You could see both streams. It's really interesting in Fritz's work. If you watch the old tapes, there are times where he is just purely a reflector of someone's experience, and other times where he'll make an intervention that one wants to almost cover their eyes and go, I can't believe he just said that to that person, because of its bluntness. My interest in continuing the stream of Gestalt teaching at Esalen is to both honor that which was and to begin to incorporate also that which is Gestalt in the world now. Gestalt is more than Fritz Perls. Gestalt at Esalen is more than Fritz Perls and Dick Price. And Gestalt owes its legacy to a great degree, both here and everywhere, to Fritz and to people like Dick. And yet, just as Esalen Massage owes its continued development, or will rely on a kind of an open-sourced perspective where learning from new sources, new approaches, different perspectives will be an incredibly important part of keeping it a rich and relevant tradition within the healing arts without losing its history. The same is true of Gestalt. One of the things that we want to bring into this new program, which the name will be Integrative Body Process, a Gestalt-based approach to individual and group dynamic facilitation and holistic leadership, is bringing back the somatic practice into the practice of Gestalt. So one sees, for instance, in the work of someone like Peter Levine. Peter was deeply influenced by Fritz Perls and by his friendship with Dick Price. When I first got here in 79 and 80, Peter was in the process of healing himself here. And he came and lived in residence for about 6 months at one point and was doing, I can almost say almost daily work with Dick. And the awareness-based practice of Gestalt has a great deal to do with the presence and awareness-based practice of somatic experiencing. This was before somatic experiencing had been developed. What I think is missing in Gestalt training at this point, and one of the things that I want to bring back into it, is the movement-based, the touch-based, the breath-based somatic practice of awareness practice itself. It's one of the reasons why in the title we didn't want to use the term Gestalt itself, because we also wanted to signify, there's a turning toward the wisdom of the body in this work, in the same way that people like Suzanne Skurlock-Durrana is presenting her work, that it's primarily a touch-based kind of an approach. We want to bring the cortical field re-education people into this program to do a piece, because one of the most brilliant Gestaltists ever trained by Fritz, her name was Alana Rubenfeld, and she created a kind of work called the Rubenfeld method, which is a combination of Feldenkrais work and Gestalt work that she learned from Fritz. And Fritz said to her, you will become the pioneer of the combination of these two great streams. And this is a kind of an orientation that we want to bring back into the awareness practice of Gestalt itself, and hopefully, train a lot of, we've got a lot of bright young people here right now, and I would like to see them become the facilitators of the future, training them in Esalen Massage and training them in Deep Bodywork and exposing them to people like Harriet Goslins and Suzanne Skurlock-Durrana, and learning how to support people in the unfolding of the continuum of awareness, which is one of the basic core teachings in Gestalt. All of these things together, I think, can create a modern iteration of a Gestalt-based training here that has great potential moving into the future.
Yeah, so Perry, I was wondering if you could talk about the new Esalen Massage teacher training program that's going on here, which is a new thing, is it not?
It is a new thing as a structured training being offered through the catalog. This curriculum has been offered once before as a pilot program in Europe, in Germany. And as a matter of fact, one of our teachers here, Carl, went and did that training, which I taught along with Deborah Meadow, Dean Marson, and Brita Ostrom, both in Germany as well as here. That went well, and because that went well, we are now able to present this program through the catalog here. It's going to be starting October 21st. It's going to happen in 3 modules. And what has been missing in the Esalen Massage curriculum has been a structured teacher training program. Yeah. Teacher training used to happen in what I would call sort of an Eastern transmission-oriented type of teaching, which was one would assist in enough workshops over time, and at a certain point, through some mysterious process, one was anointed teacher. And and that created some really brilliant teachers and some other people that clearly needed to have had some more structure to what it was they were learning. And so in this program, we're attempting to provide both.
Okay.
The structured piece is going to happen in 3 modules over a period of a year, 3 12-day modules, where different basic aspects of what is important in teaching anything are going to be taught and practiced, and of course focused upon teaching the healing art of Esalen Massage. This group is coming from all over the world. We have some Balinese coming from Indonesia. We have a couple of students coming from China. Of course, a great deal of people who have been trained in Esalen Massage from the United States, and a number of people that work on the massage crew here. People from Europe. It's going to be an international teacher training, and I'm doing it along with Peggy Horan, and we'll have some other teachers assisting us along the way. After the 3 modules are over, that's when we will move into a kind of an apprenticeship phase of the teacher training that honors the deep wisdom that comes out of the transmission-based type of learning that can only happen when one is in the field of a master teacher, witnessing, watching, demonstrating in front of the group, in front of the master teacher, right? So we're attempting to fill in the theoretical and structural gaps that have historically been missing in Esalen Massage teacher training, and yet combining that with the depth and the power of the transmission-based mentorship model, which was the way that things have historically happened here.
Well, great. Do you have time for just a couple, like a lightning round?
Sure.
Questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What's a self-care ritual that you have that keeps you looking so young and good?
Well, thank you for saying that. I would say there are 2. One is very straightforward. My wife and I go into town and do Bikram yoga 4 or 5 times a week, which is a big commitment because it takes us over an hour each way. Not that I'm saying everybody should do that, but I have kind of a more stiffly constructed body, and the heat in Bikram really helps my flexibility, and we both really enjoy that. The other thing that I would say is my wife and I lead an inquiry-based life together, where we take a lot of time for the type of self-inquiry and self-exploration that's at the heart of what is Gestalt awareness practice. And there is a deep and abiding respect, love, and appreciation, not just for each other, but for this life that has come out of that I would say it's similar to what I was saying about bodywork. You gotta like it to be good at it, you know? I really love being alive, and I really love being in partnership with my wife, and I really love the process of self-inquiry and dedicating myself to the love of truth. And these are things that keep me awakening more and more as I progress through this life. So,
what's one of your secret superpowers? Like, what's something that you're really good at that not people don't really know about, Perry?
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of people are kind of getting to know, but when I do my work, you know, I tell people up front, I listen as much to the way you say something as to what you're actually saying. And so if I ask you how you're doing and you go, good, I notice that your body and your vocal cords are saying 2 different things, right? And so one of the ways, I guess you could call it a superpower that I bring into my work is if I can get that verbal expression and the body language to be congruent, such that the body supports what's being expressed verbally, that's one way of looking at the way that I work. So that person that went, good, well, actually I'm having a pretty hard day right now. That's what's really going on. And all of a sudden it's, wow, the body and the words, they're supporting each other.
Yes.
Right. So I'd say that could be considered a superpower that I have.
How do you make bodywork still interesting and fulfilling for you? First of all, how much bodywork do you do these days? And how do you keep it fresh?
Well, one way that I keep it fresh is that I mostly only work on special cases at this point in time. So that remains tremendously interesting to me. So I'm working with a young man here who has thoracic outlet issues with one of his shoulders. And because he is deeply interested in the internal work involved in self-organization, right? I'm able to work on him and people like him from the perspective of, I'm not the healer, I'm the facilitator. You are the healer of your body. I provide an opportunity for you to self-witness and self-experience that's unique through the interventions of touch that I use. So I can bring your mind to places in your body that are very difficult to get to by yourself. And when the light of your awareness goes off there, your body does the healing. Your being does the healing, not me. Mm-hmm. So I'm the facilitator. I'm the point of reference around which that can happen. And that's a tremendously fascinating process to be a part of. And again, it goes back to, because I like doing that, it's always fresh. It's almost like each session is more interesting than the last, even though it's just as interesting in the last, but it feels more because it's present and happening right now, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Your son made the theme for this podcast. Do you share a musical sort of proclivity or this is a better question. What kind of proclivities do you share with your son? My son's a really unique individual, and witnessing his path in this life has been really a privilege. He went through a period in middle school and high school where he had autoimmune eczema that was quite extreme and really kept him from being a participant in teenagerhood in a way that was very painful to witness at that point in time. But what it also did was it accelerated his development as a self-aware individual. And he is someone who shares love of truth with his mother and with his father. And we will inquire together as a family in ways that I find really, really special. And so I would say love of truth, and of course playing guitar is something that he and I both love to do. And his love of music is much more evolved and actualized than mine, because he's really dedicating his life to that right now. And as you could see, I could never have designed the music for a podcast like he did, but he did it in like a couple of hours, and it was like, wow, that's really good. So I'm just proud of him, and witnessing his development as a human being has been a sacred experience, really. Just one more question. You're a very accomplished individual, and I'm wondering, do you have a thing or two left on your bucket list of something that you'd like to accomplish or grow towards in your second half of your life?
Well, second half of my life, that's a nice way. I'm going to be 120, Sam. I'm turning 60 this year. Yeah, right. But yeah, I'll bite on that. I like that perspective. Certainly by the time I'm 70, I would like to be moving into a practicing phase of my life again, where hopefully I will have the luxury of enough unstructured time that I can do that, and I can go study with someone like Dan Brown for a couple of years and learn what it's like to move through what he calls the elephant path toward the Dharmakaya. And I'm very interested in the process of not just self-realization, but the actualization of self-realization in this life, what it's like to live as a self-realized individual in ordinary life, in family life. And to really have time for that practice and, turn the reins of teacherhood and all of that over to the next generation in a good way, and look back and go, yeah, it's in good hands. I can let go now. Yeah.
Perry Holloman, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Esalen. Today's show is produced in conjunction with Cheryl Franzel, Geraldine Hess, Lori Putnam, Shannon Hudson, and Ian Golden. Our music is by Nico Holloman. If you'd like to hear more episodes, please find us on iTunes, and if you like what you're hearing, take a second to rate us and write a review. You can also find all of our episodes at esalen.org. That's ESALEN.org. Until next time, be well.